Okay, welcome back. We're on page 90 talking about the registry. I think we're kind of sort of done with the registry. We're going to move on to services. So once again, are they going to make it easy for me? Can I do like a right click here and get services? Not really. Not getting it. So am I going to do the same thing I did before about going in here and tweaking things? You bet your ass I am. I'm going to type services. And once again, I'm going to pin this to my start menu. I don't understand why they don't just do some of this for me, but hey, I think they want you to go through the server manager for all this, and so, they don't just, so services. Okay, now let's talk about what a service is. All right, so, Microsoft Word is obviously an application that's designed to interact with humans, right? Cool. Well, there are an awful lot of things running on your machine that have no human intervention whatsoever. Those are services. Things that run in the background. Now, you've probably seen this before. For example, when you do a right click and go to the task manager, it has these two sections. These apps section, that's the things that you're currently running. Those are the things that are attached to a human. And then these background processes, which are not attached to the human. And you're pretty much, not always, but mostly these are services, okay? They could be just plain old applications running in your address space. But normally they're running in the account that's being used is something other than you. Okay. All right. So it's a special type of application that runs in the background. And by definition, services never talk to the human. So you go, wait a minute now. For example, I have a SQL server. And it's running as a service. And yet I can fire up the management console and be able to talk to it. What do you mean I can't talk? Listen to what I just said. I have to launch another application, and the application talks to the service. So if you ever took the database course, this application called the SQL Server Management Studio finds the service, and they negotiate how they're going to talk back and forth using TCP/IP or ports or shared memory or God only knows what. There's a gazillion choices, and that's how they talk. So the human never talks directly to the service. Okay. And that's a good thing, by the way, because again, services are inherently dangerous. All right. So let's look at a service. I'm just going to pick one, for services. So get to know the startup types, page 103. There's basically several different ways you can have. I'm just going to pick one here. I'll pick whatever the heck this guy is and do properties. Okay, so the startup type. So automatic means when the machine boots up, go ahead and expose yourself. Ooh, that sounds dirty. Expose yourself to the machine and tell them that you want to run. Automatic with delayed start means, look, I want you to do this, but I don't want to slow everybody else down. This is not a critical thing. For example, do I need OneDrive in the first 15 milliseconds of the machine booting up? No, I do not. I could wait. And by the way, I'm stunned by this number, but it could wait up to 2 minutes before it says, look, I've waited long enough for the machine to quieten down. But so if you're trying to be nice to someone, then you put in automatic with delayed start. Manual basically means it will run when you, a human, or an application says, hey, I need this service. Machine's going to say, well, hang on. It's not currently running, but I'll fix that for you. Just give me a second, and it fires it up. Or a human could go in here and say start. So either way, an application says, what the heck, I don't see this guy. Well, he sees it, but he's not running. And the operating system says, I'll fix that. And then disabled basically means, no, it's not running at all. Not happening. Okay. By the way, what is it? Oh, ActiveX installer. Oh, thank God. I don't want any ActiveX stuff on my server. So that's a good thing. Okay. So working with Windows Registry and Services, page 91. So let's talk about the analogy of this guy. All right. So the top level are called hives, and hives are analogous to drive letters. And underneath these guys are keys, and keys are analogous to folders. And obviously you can have a subfolder, right? Okay. So now I get down to here and I get computer name. So this thing is called a value. Okay, so hives, keys, values is the same as drive letters, folders, files. Got it? Good. So let's talk about, I'm going to create a brand new one of these guys. So I'm just going to go here and do a right click and say new. And so here's the choices. Other than we're talking about value, a string value like this one. This one says, my server name is server1. A binary value, which could be like a graphic file or something. A 32-bit integer, a 64-bit integer, a multi-string value. Multi-string. Well, right now it only has one thing in it, but you could configure it to have like, first name, last name, street address, city, zip, a whole series of things, separated by some thing, so that the machine can have one registry value that has multiple strings in it. And then expandable string. Now this is kind of cool. Remember the talk about the environmental variables, particularly the one about profile and temp. Let's say I wanted to set a service up, or I'm sorry, a registry key that pointed to your temp, but I don't know what your temp is. So what I would do is I would go in here and say expandable string, and I'd call this whatever it is, kumquat. And when I do this, I would say percent temp percent something, right? Whatever. Whatever, kumquat, txt, something. And so that, instead of having it come up with the words temp, it's going to expand those environmental variables and it'll always work. Now, you'll see a lot of that in the registry because the people who wrote these things don't know what your profile, where your profile is, doesn't know where your... By the way, I'm going to go ahead and whack this. I don't want to keep stuff out there. Oh my God! Yes, okay, whatever. Okay. So modifying existing one, that's pretty straightforward. Modify, I can go in here and change the value. It's no big deal. This is delete and rename. That's all kind of self-explanatory. Okay. So accessing and managing services 94, starting up with recovery options. If you were boot your machine up in recovery mode, remember we talked about the current control set guy? Remember that? If you start up in recovery mode, it's going to pick one of these guys. Okay. So you could set up a service to say what happens when it fails. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and just pick this guy just because it's easy. So if I go to the recovery part, it says, what happens on the first time it fails? Well, just try again. What happens on the second time? Well, then try again. What happens after that? Well, just stop, okay? I mean, if it doesn't work after that many seconds, and so it takes two minutes, and if it doesn't work, it tries 2 minutes again, and after 4 minutes, it says, I'm out of here, dude. Anyway, and then, well, yeah, this prevents a service from just beating on itself, like starting, stop, failing and failing and failing and failing over and over and over and over and over. This one basically says, strike 3 and you're out. Okay, I'm never going to mess with you again, kind of a thing, until you reboot. Okay. I like the automatic delay thing. That's pretty cool. And then what account is being used? Now, in the old days, this was pretty doggone crazy because almost all the services, like Windows 95 days, the services were all running under administrator privileges, which was really, really, really bad. So they created these things called special accounts. Now, the local account is an account that's designed to have superhuman powers. It is an administrator, but only on this machine. When that account gets, you try to use that account like across the wire to another server or another PC, it's going to say, I'm sorry, I don't play that game. So it still has admin rights, but only on the machine. Okay, and allow service to interact with the desktop? Hell no. I don't want that. Okay, so start and stop, that's fairly obvious, And what dependencies it has, I can't start this one before that one. By the way, this is a pretty cool feature because if a service starts, it goes, hang on, I need this guy to start. Like, for example, I can't run Internet Information Services without TCP/IP running. So if you got them out of order, so to speak, this is going to solve the problem for you. Okay, so local system basically has admin privileges but can't authenticate on a remote system at all. Local service is a built-in account, but it's basically the same as a users group, which isn't much. Okay, in other words, you're not an administrator. You still can't authenticate across the wire, but you're not an administrator. Network services, this is a user account that can go across to the other side. So those are the choices. And then, of course, dependencies. So on page 105, they kind of tie this thing all together, talking about, using the server manager, which we did not. Using the desk, we put our, if you have desktop experience, you got this thing. And so if you don't have that, you're going to have to use this server core. And I am not going to ask you to do that, because that is well beyond the skill sets that I'm prepared to talk about today. Okay, so we made it to the end of this, and I'll see you guys again in the next video.